morning, everybody. Thank you for joining us this week for our episode of the Elora Festival Encounters. This episode is me interviewing a number of members of the Elora Singers, and so they've joined us here this morning. We're now at the end of July, and if this had been a regular year, we would have just wrapped up our Elora Festival in the summer. Yesterday, in fact, would have been our final concert, or final day of concerts. And this summer has obviously looked very different from other summers in past. And for that reason, I thought it would be good to get together with some of our singers to see what they've been up to during the pandemic. So joining me here today are four of the singers, and I'm going to ask them to introduce themselves to you right now.
Hi everyone, I'm Lesley Bouza. I sing soprano 2 in the Elora Singers, and I've been singing with this choir since 2009.
Good morning everyone, my name is Paul Grambo. I sing bass 2 in the choir, and this would have been my 13th season with the festival. I'm not sure what year that is.
My name is Katy Clarke. I'm a soprano 1 with the choir, and this is my 5th season with the Elora Singers.
And I'm Andrew Walker. I'm a tenor, and I think Katy, you and I started at the same time. I think about 5 years ago or so. So yeah. Great to see all of your faces, and I miss you all, and hope all is great.
We're obviously coming to you from our own homes and places, because we haven't gathered. In fact, our last concert together was, I think, in February, sometime before anything really was brewing. I mean, we knew something was coming, but we didn't know at that point how significant this pandemic was going to be, how long it would be. I think we all had great hopes that something, our summer festival would still go on, but of course, that's all changed. So I'd like to hear a little bit about what you all have been doing during the pandemic, but maybe before we do that, you could tell us a little bit about what you do besides being members of the Elora Singers. This is obviously the month of July is a very intense period of our creative music making normally, but the other 11 months of the year, what are you up to? What do you do?
I sing in several other choirs and ensembles, including being a professional corps of the Toronto Mendelssohn Choir. I sing with La Chapelle de Quebec, which is the choir associated with Les Violons du Bois in Quebec City, and just kind of soprano for hire as a chorister or a soloist. I'm also an accredited music therapist, so I run music therapy programming mostly in Toronto. I have 2 mental health groups at Michael Garron Hospital, one in adult mental health inpatient and one in pediatric mental health inpatient. They're not running right now because those groups are considered high risk. Yeah. So those programs are shut down for the moment. And I also run a group called Singing to Breathe for the Pulmonary Rehab Clinic at Toronto Western Hospital. Also shut down, considering it's a group of people who are dealing with various lung diseases and disorders. So they're a very vulnerable population. So I miss all my groups dearly, but I can't wait to get back to working with them, because music is the way we're getting through this, and it's the way a lot of those populations are moving through what they're going through as well.
Yeah, I'm sure it must be very difficult for those who, the clients with whom you work on a regular basis as a music therapist to be missing that aspect of their own development and recoveries and so on. For those, of us, of our listeners who may not know what music therapy looks like, what does that entail? Can you tell us a bit about that?
The great thing about music therapy is that it can look however it needs to look based on the needs of the particular patient or population that you're working with. So in mental health, it can look like someone's sharing a song that they listen to when they're feeling particularly anxious or particularly down, and we'll talk about the lyrics, or we'll talk about a particular instrument that just, when it plays in the song, it just really makes them connect to how they're feeling and able to sit in that emotion in a way that they get through it. So that's just one example. In our Singing to Breathe group, I think what I particularly like about this one is that we use singing and breathing techniques to support the pulmonary rehab that the patients are going through. So these people are all, they have compromised lung function. Some of them are pre or post transplant, and we use deep breathing, we use vocal exercises, so tongue trills, all those sorts of things that you would use to warm up your voice. We use that to help them support their lung function. And then we also use singing together as a group for the kind of psychosocial support that they need for what they're going through. Yeah, and it's just really cool for me to be able to pick apart all these different pieces of something that I love so much and apply it in really purposeful ways, and to create meaning and create tools for these folks to cope with what they're dealing with. Yeah.
What is the response like from somebody who may have just had a transplant and now they're being asked to come and sing with you as part of their recovery? Like, are they surprised by that? Is it something they kind of opt into?
Yeah, so everybody who comes to the pulmonary rehab clinic is invited to this group. It's not mandatory treatment for them. Yeah. So what we usually do is we say, come in, sit back, see how you're doing. It's a long group. It's 2 hours straight with a break. We do half of it is breathing and vocal exercises, and half of it is singing songs together. And so we say you can stay for part of it. Just some people just stay for the exercises because they're not really, they don't feel comfortable singing in a group. So they just do the exercises because they feel that's more functional. So that kind of helps them get in. Yep. But a lot of times people come for the exercises for a few weeks and then they get kind of interested and they end up staying. So our group is usually between 20 to 25 people each week. I co-run it with another therapist, and the response we get, we do feedback forms at the end of every session, and we get things like, I couldn't breathe when I got here. I was having a really hard time, and now my chest feels open. It feels lighter, and at the same time, I feel happier. I had fun. I connected to other people. So it's just an example of like the whole package of everything that this field has to offer.
That's so fantastic. The mental health side of recovery is something that we don't often think about. You need time to recover. You need to heal and so on. But the mind needs to heal too. And
absolutely, yeah.
Like such a wonderful way to marry those two kinds of therapies. The pulmonary, the breathing, and so on with feeling good and
yeah.
Oh, wonderful. Yeah, that's great. Andrew, how about you?
Yeah, well, I'm usually based in the last couple of years of Ottawa, and so I've been working in and around the government in Ottawa, the federal government, over the last number of years. I worked on Parliament Hill for a little bit there, and now I'm working sort of just outside of it in some of the advocacy groups there. It's kind of an interesting path. So, the singers in the choir have such a variety of different paths they take to working as a professional singer and experiencing that and training and that sort of thing. And mine happens to be as something that, I've simultaneously been really passionate and loved music, choral music for all of my life, but I've also loved politics and government and policy and those sorts of things too. And so I've been working at that and also working on a master's in Canadian studies throughout this period of time. So that's kind of over the last little while here, I've been based in Ottawa doing that.
And if I'm not mistaken, your master's work involves an aspect of choral life too, doesn't it?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I've grown up singing choral music, and I've always been really curious about sort of the intersection of those two passions that I just spoke to, that sort of government and policy and funding piece, but also the beauty of music making and singing with such talented musicians and different community groups all across Ontario and beyond. And so I wanted to study further sort of cultural policy and how and why we fund the arts in Canada, so we can talk about that in a different way or in a sort of strengthened way. And so I'm working on a thesis right now that is examining the lives of, people like the folks on this call, professional choral musicians, and the different paths they might take to get there, the different experiences they have, whether they're the type of choral musician that sings in 20 different choirs and is gigging every night of the week and trying different things, or if they're the type of choral musician that sings in the church choir on Sunday mornings and Thursday nights, and that's what they love to do, and they do that because they've always done it and they grew up singing that way. I mean, the experience is quite varied. And at the end of it, I hope to have sort of gleaned a little bit of light, or shone a little bit of light on the variety of experiences and what that might mean for administrators and conductors, but also policymakers beyond that. So in a nutshell, that's kind of what I'm working on in my master's thesis right now.
And is it too early to ask sort of what the results of that research are? I mean, have you been able to draw some conclusions? I mean, it's a fascinating study, and I'm not sure anybody has really looked at the sort of politics and funding and the life experience of what professional choral singing looks like in terms of research. I mean, anecdotal, we all have stories, but in terms of this kind of formal research, that's maybe new territory. Good, thanks, Andrew. And Paul and Katy, you're together there in the same Zoom box, so you can decide who goes first.
Go ahead.
Okay, I'll go first. Yeah, so I also do a lot of choral singing in addition to my work with the Elora Singers. So I sing with a number of groups. I also sing with the Mendelssohn Choir as part of the pro corps there. I sing with the 8-voice group Opus 8. I sing occasionally with the Canadian Opera Company chorus. So I do lots of that kind of thing. I also do solo work. But in addition to that, I'm working on my doctorate in music, in voice at the University of Toronto. And I am entering my 3rd year of that degree, which means I'm now done all of my coursework, but I'm writing now. Yeah. So yeah, it feels great to be done the coursework part. That's really nice. So yeah, so that's a lot of writing, a little bit of teaching. And then in addition to that, I also run a small opera company in London, which is where we are right now and where I'm from. It's my hometown, called Village Opera. And we do productions that always involve a Canadian element, and it's the point is sort of to create performance opportunities for young performers from London, because there's not always a lot going on between that bridge of, okay, I graduate from school with my degree in whatever kind of work, and then I'm now a full-time professional singer. In London, there's not really much buffer, so yeah, filling that gap there.
Good for you for creating those opportunities for young singers to be able to gain some professional experience. It feels great when you're in a program and you think this is what life is going to be like, and then the reality of graduating and okay, now what, right? And so these opportunities for young musicians are really important. So that's
absolutely.
Can you say a little bit about what you're working on in terms of your research? Congratulations, first of all, for getting your coursework out of the way. That's a great feeling.
Yes, it is.
Remember, and now the real work in some ways begins, because it's much more independent and you're sort of on your own timeline and so on. So what are you tackling?
Yeah, so my research is into 4 operas by John Beckwith and James Rainey. John Beckwith is, of course, a living Canadian composer. He's a bit of a legend in Canada. So I'm really excited to be able to work on a piece, or 4 pieces that are by a living composer. There are going to be some interviews involved, that kind of a thing. But James Rainey was a playwright and author and poet that was from London and wrote almost exclusively about this area. So much of his work takes place in rural southwestern Ontario, like most famously The Donleys is a play that he got a lot of acclaim for, and it was about a rather tawdry murder that happened just north of London in the 1880s.
Oh, wow.
So yeah, so it's this sort of regionalist flavor to all of his work, and that includes the 4 operas. So it's really interesting to be working on 4 operas that are about where I come from. So I'm really enjoying kind of digging into things from that perspective.
That's
Yeah.
very cool. Very
Yeah.
cool. Yeah. That was,
I want to see that. That sounds great.
Yeah. It's I'm excited about it. It's kind of taking shape. So, yeah.
Very good. And are you working closely with John to do this, or is it more of a, you'll do your research and then sort of check in with him? What's that process like? It's always, when you're studying Beethoven, you have the documents that exist and that's what you have. But when you are working on a living composer, it's a very different kind of experience. And
It is very different. It is very different. The interviews are going to be a really important part of this whole project. So I'm very excited to hear what he has to say about these pieces and about the process of working with James Rainey. They were also like the best of friends. They raised their kids together. They met when they were undergrads at U of T together. So
wow.
yeah, kind of digging into that relationship. That'll be really fun.
Yeah.
But there's a huge amount of archival material on James Rainey. Like he was a writer, so he documented everything. So there are just, all of these piles of archives that I'm quite excited to dig through once the library's open again. So.
Yes, that's a challenge for any researcher right now is accessing stuff that you need to access, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely.
Paul?
So I think it's safe to say that I'm a professional Zoom teacher, is what I am. Outside of singing in Elora, most of what I do is I have a private studio. I've had a private studio here in London for over 15 years, and it is mostly mature students, which has presented some difficulties over this time. Because some simply didn't have and don't have the capabilities to do online lessons. However, there are always some that surprise you. So my youngest student at present is I think 14, and my oldest is a lady whose age I probably shouldn't say. Yeah, a lady of a certain age.
29.
And yeah, at least 29. Yeah, and it's wonderful. In fact, I have two ladies of a certain age who surprise me every week by conquering the technology and coming and working to make some great music from either their basement or their unair conditioned upper room, and it's just it's great. So the teaching side is what has kept me going for years, and certainly it has continued to. In addition to that, I'm the conductor of two community choirs here in London, and an assistant director at St. James Westminster Anglican Church, which is just a few blocks from me here. During the time of COVID, one of the choirs has taken a break completely. We're looking at what we can do in September. The other has continued through online means, which has been interesting, certainly challenging, but I think also quite rewarding in many ways, especially for the amateur musician, the mature amateur musician. It's wonderful that I can provide some sort of way for these folks to still have some sort of outlet, and the kind of things that I hear quite regularly is how this is something that they look forward to, each week, and I'm feeling especially hard for those for whom that is their only outlet. For someone like me who can sit down at a piano and just I can do some stuff. Those folks necessarily can't. They need the structure and the ensemble to speak, and so it's been hard for them. Yeah.
That's something I think that we're all missing, and not just the work that I do with the Elora Singers, but I've got other choirs as well, the Grand Philharmonic Choir, 100 singers, 100 plus singers, and yeah, we struggle with that, figuring out how we can stay connected with each other. And we found ways early on in the pandemic to do that. But it doesn't feel the same as getting in a room and singing together, and so we're thinking too about, what does the fall look like and what kinds of activities can we do that a rewarding, creative, and fulfilling, and has the social engagement piece as well. It's a tough place that we're in,
Yeah.
In that way. How have you all remained creative over this time period? I mean, so much of your work, whether it's singing professionally in choirs or even in teaching and in music therapy and so on, there are creative elements to that I'm sure you're all missing. I confess that I joined the bandwagon early on in the pandemic of baking bread, because that was something I could do, and something I could have a little bit of control over, and so I went out once flour was available again, and found a 40-pound bag that I'm still working my way through. So that felt good for a little while, but cooking has been nice, a nice way to stay creative and feel like you're doing something at least. What have you found that has kept those sort of creative juices going?
Do you want to go backwards? I'll go first.
Sure. Yeah.
Sure. So, okay, great. Odds and ends. Gardening. I started a garden, which you wouldn't know that it's as creative as it feels, because it's really rather overgrown with weeds at the moment. But never mind that. And so it's that's been something that my daughter and I have been able to watch. To start from the ground up and watch come to fruition. Right. Science projects. Again, my daughter's 14, and so we can work on things and seeing how things work and that sort of stuff. But it's funny. Actually, church. My church has continued to do a podcast, and so I have found that I really rather enjoy, which is, thank goodness for this. I really rather enjoy audio engineering. So yeah, right. So mixing and recording and all that kind of stuff of the various parts and using the technology in that. So
it's quite good.
Thank you. I've managed to keep the musical creative juices flowing with that, and also with the choir I still conduct.
Very good.
Yeah.
Yeah, I've also jumped on the gardening bandwagon. I like to think actually I was the instigator behind that.
Yeah, you were.
His garden was my idea. Yeah. So
takes all the credit, does he?
Yeah, he does. I was like, dude, I was gonna lead with the gardening thing.
That's why I wanted to go first.
My garden is bigger. But yes, I've been doing a lot of gardening, and actually it's quite exciting because I love gardening and never have time. I'm always gone in July.
Yeah,
so
exactly.
This is, hopefully the only time I'm ever going to have time and space to actually do a garden properly for the next little while. So it's been really cool. I'm starting to harvest some things. We've had some lovely new potatoes. We're starting to get some beets. Lots of good herbs. The summer squash is just, exploding all over the place. So that's great. Yeah. But then I've been doing a bit of the online teaching thing as well. And that's creative. I mean, you have to be very creative in order to frame that method of teaching in different ways and to make it still meaningful. Yeah. So it's been really interesting working with some of my students to figure out what their goals are going to be through this, and to find weird, new, exciting repertoire that they can work on, from their homes. But it means that instead of working towards a particular performance right now, what I'm doing with a lot of them is working towards a recording project. Okay. So, we're working on, obviously, the singing side of things, but also facilitating some learning in terms of some of this audio engineering stuff so that they actually have the skill set to record themselves and come up with a product that they're happy with. So that's been a bit of a learning curve. I tend to be a bit of a Luddite when it comes to technology, so this is all very difficult for me.
How many of us have learned, more about this kind of technology in the last 4 months than we ever thought?
Oh yeah.
No, so much more than I ever wanted to know.
Absolutely. I mean, I don't think I had ever heard the word Zoom used, in this context before March, and now we're spending, sometimes several hours a day, communicating with people this way. And that has its benefits in some ways. You know, I think the music community has come together in ways that we maybe just don't have time to do in regular time, you know, in terms of getting choral leaders across the country together and meeting and discussing helping each other, coming up with ideas, sharing ideas, those sorts of things. It's kind of a neat byproduct or silver lining maybe of this COVID period. Andrew, you seem to have learned how to transport yourself during COVID. So tell us about that.
I'm in my dad has all of his car posters up here, so you can now observe how much of an Toronto indie fan he is.
Oh, very cool.
I've had at least 2 different groups of friends do online readings of different plays over the last while, which I think is one of my favorite things I've ever done. It's so much fun to just get together and one of the people in the group sort of divvies up the parts, and we work from the same copy of the play or the book or whatever, and we just sit on a Zoom call for a couple of hours and read it, I guess, to each other, or perform it for each other, which I've found to be both a wonderful way to get in touch and to be with friends, but also to, you know, engage with you know, a different form of art.
Some great literature, yeah. What are some of the plays that you've read together?
Gosh, well, everyone else joined, and I've done some Shakespeare now. I wasn't there for that one. What was last week? I wasn't there on Saturday.
Cherry Orchard on Saturday.
It was so depressing. It was beautiful and meaningful, but so depressing. Oh my gosh.
It was quite heavy.
Yeah, but it's great to just be able to.
Quite an undertaking, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Anyway, it's a lot of fun just to be able to do that, and, you know, just be together and try out something a little different.
Yeah, that's a very cool thing to do. What about you, Lesley?
Well, non-musical stuff. I have a houseplant collection that has grown exponentially over the past few months.
Yeah.
I found a couple of local plant shops that will deliver to my door for free, and it's been kind of problematic. So now I have a plant in every corner that receives even a sliver.
Are you becoming a plant lady? Is that what's happening?
Before I was like a moderate plant lady, like I had a reasonable number of plants, and now I have more than that. So there's that. Also, thank goodness for dogs. Me and my roommate have been long-term dog sitting a dog while her owner's in Australia for 2 years, and she has just kept us completely sane. Like, just partly it's the routine of like, you gotta walk the dog, you gotta feed the dog, you gotta like pay attention to the dog when the dog is like pawing at you for like belly rubs, and just like the joy of having a loving creature in your life. So that's been big as well.
Pretty unconditional love too, isn't it?
Yes. Oh my gosh. And we love her just as much back. And yeah, I can't cook or anything, so nothing like that. But our Saturday night hangouts with the choir have been huge. Like, there were a couple of like low spots for me throughout this pandemic, and sometimes I'd be like, oh, Saturday, I'm gonna see like everybody, we're gonna play games, we're gonna read a play. Like, that's gotten me through the week in some cases, keeping those social connections. Musically, I've found little projects for myself to do. I can't not sing. That's just like not an option for me. So I've put together a couple of different like virtual choir video projects with like larger groups and smaller groups. And a couple weeks ago, I organized a concert on my porch. I am lucky enough to live on a street with a lot of creative people. We have visual artists on the street, we have musicians, we have a phenomenal organist that lives a couple doors down. So I was pretty sure the street would be pretty down for a concert. And so and I'm lucky to have several amazing musicians in my bubble. So we were able to safely accomplish that. So we had Ross Ingalls on piano. I know some of you know him. And we had drum, bass, a couple of vocalists, and we had like a concert slash party on my porch for the neighborhood, and it was fantastic. And so many people came up to me after just being like we needed that. We just needed an outlet. We needed something to happen that was uplifting and fun. So yeah, I just keep myself busy with little projects.
That's so great. This time period has been so difficult for bringing people together because we can't, unless we're on a Zoom call like this. And thankfully now that things are loosening up a little bit, and you can do something like that to have your community join you, in front of your house on your porch, and be.
It's all very safe and socially distanced.
Absolutely. Yes, a disclaimer. Right?
Disclaimer, I've measured out spaces on the porch for people who weren't in the bubble.
Yeah. No,
you are 8 feet away from the drums.
That's so important for people to be able to come together that way, and nice that neighborhoods can do that, especially if you're in such a creative neighborhood. That's really
yeah, it's a fantastic street.
Yeah. Okay, next question here, and this is don't look so nervous, Katy. This what have you been listening to? What gets you through the day? This could be music, it could be like guilty pleasure listening, it could be podcasts or something. Give us something that we should go and check out. Maybe something new.
So I'll go first.
Go ahead, Lesley.
I love musicals, so I've been discovering a bunch of new musicals that maybe have been around, but I hadn't really come across. So, for example, Groundhog Day, the musical.
Oh my gosh. Who
I've
knew?
been good. I've been
Bill
listening
Murray also in that?
nonstop. Hades Town, also a good new find that I've been enjoying.
Yeah.
I've also gone back to some artists that have always piqued my interests, but that I've never really delved into. One of those has been Joan Armatrading, who has this massive body of work, all these fantastic albums, and I've heard songs here and there and really loved the timbre of her voice and just the topics that she sings about, and she has kind of, I feel like a sound that can be surprising sometimes, some things she puts together that are unexpected. So I've been delving into Joan Armatrading.
Very cool.
Yeah.
Good.
I have to say, this hasn't been for me so much a period of discovering new music as sort of going back to old friends. So there are things that I sort of always cycle back to, especially when things get a bit hard. So one of those things for me is the Joni Mitchell Blue album. I now know it inside and out, and I can just sit there in the middle of the floor and listen to it and just cry and cry and cry. It's wonderful. So that's a wonderful old friend to go back to. But in terms of podcasts, there's a really great podcast that actually Julia Barber, who's another singer with the Elora Singers, recommended to me a couple of years ago, and it's called The Allusionist with an A, with Helen Zaltzman. And it's fascinating. It's all about sort of etymology and the history and development of the English language, which sounds really dull, but she's hilarious. She's hilarious and sassy, and she gets really interesting people on the show. So that's just a really great way to kind of take my mind off of some of the nitty gritty of what's going on in real life. It's oh, I wonder about the history of this one particular word. I wonder about naming conventions in Iceland. I think I'll go see what Helen Zaltzman has to say about that.
That sounds great.
Yeah.
Allusionist with an A.
Allusionist with an A, yeah.
I have to check that one.
Mm-hmm.
I listen to a lot of CBC. I have before, but I listen to even more now. Odario, at the end of the day, I love, and those are. I feel like I know Julie Nasrallah really well.
We welcome these people into our homes, right, for hours and hours. Time. Yeah.
And actually, Hamilton has come back into our lives in a pretty major way since the video came out on July 3rd.
Yes.
So we had a very nice watch of it with Paul's daughter, and that was great. And so that means that now, I've had to replay the soundtrack over and over and over since then.
She's also introducing me to basically popular music. I didn't know that was a thing.
Who, me?
Apparently, people are still making new
There's a
music.
pretty large body of repertoire out there. You know, there's like, you know, there's
she,
Andrew's choral evensong repertoire, and then there's like there's this whole thing of popular.
this whole thing. We play this game. We play this game. She's like, so here's the song, Dad. Here's the name of the group, and then she looks at me like, do you have any idea? And either my answer is
glossy look.
yeah. And so she's actually putting together a playlist of sort of new stuff that's like, Dad, just here, listen to this. Yeah. Like you need to know this. So apparently I like Hozier a lot.
Very good. Last question here before we wrap up. And what are you looking forward to when we get out of this thing?
Ooh.
I can take a stab, and I'm sure this is, I mean, this is all of us. I would put it in two streams. From the sort of self-serving perspective, there is nothing, and I mean nothing, like getting together with a group of some of your closest friends and some of the most talented musicians there are, getting into a room and making music together. There really is nothing like that. The feeling, I have a very fond and specific memory of our first rehearsal for last summer's festival. We were sitting at Chris and Jeannie Houston's place, and as we do so often as we're rehearsing, and there's the fourth movement of a piece we were working on, and it starts, everyone singing together, and then there's a moment where the tenors just get to sit there and listen to the basses sing the melody, and the sopranos and altos are kind of flying away. And I genuinely had a tear come to my eye, because here I am sitting and I get to be here and listen to this wonderful music, but also to create something with meaning and to tell a story in that way. So that particular piece was an entire story, but I really think there is a great story to be told about resurgence, about coming together, about gratitude for what we do have, about mourning for what has been and the people that have been lost. But there are so many great stories that we'll be able to tell through music and also by all the other different forms of art that other folks are going to create over the next number of years. I mean, this is a seminal moment in all of our lifetimes. Mm-hmm. And so I have such anticipation and excitement for when we can start to see, we already are in some ways, but when we can start to see both ourselves as we create it, but also see others, the creations, the fruits of their labor and the stories that they're able to tell coming out of it.
Well said.
Yeah.
Talk about like the folks who come to see us too. I mean, right. Like in the last, I've been singing in the festival for 5 years. We talked about Paul and Lesley longer, and it's a real community, Elora specific. It's the patrons that we have and the folks who come to a concert, one concert a summer, or some who come, goodness, I see the same two people at every single concert we have during the festival. Sometimes that the variety of it, in some ways, those are sort of my summer family, just seeing those faces and seeing those people. I made a point of it just this weekend. I went up to Elora because I thought it's July. I'm not going to not be in Elora at some point in July. And walking down the street, I saw several the faces that I recognized. We sat and had a pint at the pub where I would go have a drink after a concert. And I'm like, yeah, this is a community too. And so, I mean, I know that we all are incredibly grateful for our patrons and supporters and those who come to our concerts, for coming and for supporting our art and supporting us, but also for being part of the community. It's not just, the musicians and the artists themselves, but this is everybody. That's one of the most magical things about the Elora Festival and the Elora Singers is that it isn't, we're not, there's a great value in, going on tour and doing lots of shows, and that's fantastic. I don't mean to mean that anyway, but there's a real special element to a community that comes together every year to sit around and hear music and to, be together. Anyways, I'm really looking forward to doing that again whenever we're allowed to do that.
Absolutely, it's a pretty palpable feeling, isn't it? Especially, I can imagine those rehearsals, those early rehearsals at the Houstons, as you say, and those special moments as we encounter new music together and learn it together, grow with it together, and ultimately get to bring it to an audience. That's a pretty special gift that we're able to do. Yeah. Well, I want to thank you all for taking time this morning to have this conversation. it's great to see you. We haven't seen each other in so long, and to be able to share this time together has been really fun and really interesting, and great to hear a little bit about what you are up to. As you all know, the Elora Festival didn't happen in its usual form this year, but we do have a little bit of a surprise for our audience, our patrons online, coming up in just a few days, August 6th through 8th, with some of our guests and the Elora Singers doing some at-home singing as part of that programming, and so we'll look forward to all of that as well. Good luck with your gardening, with your plants, with your research, Andrew. All of those things that help us stay creative and connected to that aspect of our lives. And again, thank you so much for being part of this conversation today.
Thank you for sitting.
Mark.
Yes, thanks.
Thank
Bye,
you.
everybody.